Hi there folks, welcome to a brand new episode of CNB here on the NDTV network. I'm Siddharth Vinayak Partnkar. On the program with us today we have the all-new second generation of the Range Rover Sport. That's right, it's not just this particular car that you see here looking lovely in red. This is the 3-litre diesel, but we've also got the 5-litre supercharged petrol on the show, and so plenty of details. Lots to take you through, some gorgeous countryside as well, and hopefully the weather holds up, so plenty then to look forward to over the next half hour. The new Range Rover Sport now shares its platform with the new Range Rover. Confusing? Well, don't worry about it too much. But despite sharing the platform, the two cars share only 30% of their parts. What is common though is the rare for SUVs, all aluminium construction. That makes the car a totally different beast, and of course very stiff too. The aluminium construction gets us a car that's 25% stiffer than the older one. The car's chassis uses 40% fewer joints than before, which adds to that stiffness. Now this also makes the car 39% or nearly half a ton lighter than before too. Now you'd remember that I had already shared my thoughts on styling and design overall. The looks initially seem very similar to the larger Range Rover flagship car. And yes, that in turn means a face that's akin to the Evoque. But look closer and you realize that the proportions on this car are indeed very different. It has a lower roofline. It isn't as stately or large looking as the Range Rover, and for me, these proportions work way better. It is also very different in its character when on the move. I set out into the English countryside towards southeastern Wales. The drive was smooth and pretty, with some good stretches of narrow 2-lane roads. The car I did decide to drive first, the 3-litre SD V6 diesel. Now there will be 2 of the 4 engine options offered when the car arrives in India this autumn, and this is of course one of them. As I mentioned earlier, the 5-litre supercharged petrol is the other one, but we'll come to that later. The 3-litre diesel V6 block is offered in 2 tuning specs. We get the higher grade SD V6 that's got 290 horses of power. The gearbox in particular is very smooth, that's an 8-speed, and it really adds to the modern feel. Now soon I had the first chance to get typically Range Rover. What do I mean by that? Well, we headed to the military training grounds at Seni Bridge, great countryside and a narrow ribbon of tarmac. Lots of chances to test the car's maneuverability, as the road undulated through tight turns and plenty of ups and downs. The broken road surface also gave me a decent sense of the suspension. And then I managed to make quite a big splash by going off the road. Next up, it was a stretch of forested mountain road, or should I say gravel track. Plenty of dust, a loose surface, and basically a whole lot of fun. It was a chance to switch the automatic terrain response system to gravel mode. Now when Daniel Craig drove this car into the Moynihan station in Manhattan, the Land Rover management made a very strong claim. They said that this car is more agile and more sporty when compared to its predecessor. Well, I'll tell you what, we've had our chance now to drive the car in all sorts of terrain. We've gone off-road, we've gone onto a gravel track, we've also had some nice twisty, winding country roads, and of course, some motorway as well. And after having done all that, I can tell you that claim has been verified. Now, the other point, of course, that you'll want to know is that what's the big USP? Well, again, when you compare to the previous generation, I think the hallmark of this vehicle's drive will be its handling. The car is definitely sporty, and I'm not trying to be cliched as far as the name goes, but yes, it is, because it sort of hugs the road. It really responds well to you, and there isn't a sense of roll that comes through either as far as the chassis goes. And so yes, I have to say it's really satisfactory. And so I think if the hallmark of the Range Rover, the new Range Rover, is luxury and just ticking all the boxes on this one, I think it's the fun character, it is the handling, and the diesel engine lives up to that characteristic as well. So, the diesel is driven. Now time for me to divert my attention to the 500 horses awaiting me in the supercharged variant. Since we still had some time on the mountain road, I decided to go for a spin right here on the gravel. Now I sneakily turned off the onboard traction control and switched the auto terrain response back to dynamic mode. I mean, how often can you get an SUV to slide around, eh? Just taking a bit of a break here to quickly talk a little bit about the interiors on this car. Now, for all its capability that you've been seeing right through the show, let's not forget that this is a premium luxury offering, and which means it needs to take on some pretty stiff competition from the likes of the Porsche Cayenne, the Mercedes-Benz GL to a certain extent. And so it's important that you have a very plush sense from the cabin. On this particular car, you can see a gorgeous shade of red leather that's been thrown in along with black. And you can, of course, do a whole lot here in terms of just figuring out what works for you. And that shouldn't come as a surprise to most of you. What I do like, as compared especially to the cabin on the Range Rover, is that you've got a slightly different, and yes, I know it's going to sound cliched now, but a sportier appeal to the way that the dash has been laid out. It's got a bit of an angle to it. Everything looks a little bit more sort of agile and energetic, and that design language works for me. I think it looks pretty smart, and yet it's fairly minimalist and it's not sort of cluttered with too many buttons. So on the whole, the new touch screen, all of that works well, comes together well. Now there is visually no difference between the two cars in that there's nothing special about the 5-litre V8 variant. But then both cars with us are the top of the line autobiography trim levels. And yes, there is an additional option of the dynamic pack added onto both cars. I'll talk about that pack a little later though. These cars are also equipped with a panoramic sunroof, which does look pretty cool and high-end. The Chile Red and the Scotia Grey are the two colors with us, but there are 18 colors to choose from in all. And yes, you can opt for a contrast roof, either in black, white or silver, depending on the body color. We need to drive the 5-litre car, don't we? Well, let's do that after a short break here on CNB. Our pick of the second screen questions this week comes from Pujit Chanana. Which car is best in the 18 to 22 lakh rupee budget? Pujit, the answer is quite simple. It has to still be the Škoda Superb. Given the choices in the market and the various price points they operate at, this remains the most practical and compelling choice. Welcome back to CNB. Right, so as I told you before the break, it's time to put that claim to the test. Should the car be called Sport? Now, unlike the previous generation where it was just a different name really, this car claims to be something different. And so we are now at the Kemble airstrip. The perfect location to put something like that to the test. Nice smooth tarmac, we've got a few cones in place, so we've got a slalom run and then some high-speed cornering coming up. Let's get started. I've got the right engine for it as well. So let's get started with that slalom course right away. The car is agile, is very much un-SUV-like. And yes, I have to say it, the 5-litre engine is very much the one to have on such a course. A quick look at its numbers emphasizes just why that is, isn't it? And that 8-speed gearbox comes alive even more on this powertrain. Now, while we're doing this slalom run, it's also a good opportunity to talk about torque vectoring. That is something new. It's a brand new feature that's been thrown in by Land Rover. It's only on the Range Rover Sport for now, and it's part of the dynamic pack. So it's not standard on the car, it only comes in as a part of that pack. And before we explain to you what it really does, what I can tell you is that it's nice to have yet another technology USP, because you know, a few years ago, that's not the kind of stuff you expected from Land Rover. So just like the Range Rover brought in, you know, better weighting capability, the auto system on the terrain response, now you've got something new, torque vectoring. Let's get into it.
Torque vectoring is drawn on sports car technology with an active locking rear differential that allows us to, along with the slip control systems, carefully distribute the torque at all four wheels in the corner.
Torque vectoring system as well as the electronic rear differential and active lean control are part of the optional dynamic pack that buyers can get. The rear diff for traction is a little bit different to the one in the previous car, in that it now sends different amounts of torque to the two sides, giving you more precise handling and better performance. Alright, so a sports car like characteristic. I have to say that was pretty impressive, but it's a Range Rover. You don't really want it to really go on an airstrip or on a test track. You really want it to go off-road. All sorts of crazy antics. You want to get gritty and, you know, throw it into some obstacles. Well, that's typically what Range Rover drives are meant to be, isn't it? It's a different kind of an obstacle because we're going to stay here on the airstrip, and the big challenge is right behind me. It's a 747. We are going aboard, and I can tell you, I get the feeling I'm in for quite a surprise. All right, I am all set. Is this going to be fun? You bet. So how crazy is that? Whoever thought of this is bloody brilliant or smoking something, right? So a steep incline sent me up into the plane, a tight squeeze through the rear doorway. Once inside, the car had to negotiate a steep sideways incline, avoiding a Defender parked in there, and then up into the first-class cabin, towards the cockpit, another steep incline. Pretty hairy stuff. Into first class and a sharp dip to exit the aircraft from under its nose. Hill descent control doing the rest. Touchdown. I said crazy, right? Phew. Now that red color is nice, and the diesel is probably the variant that's going to get all the attention in our market when the Range Rover Sport arrives. But to a lot of people, it's going to be this, the beast, the V8, that's going to really, you know, exemplify what the Range Rover Sport, and especially that Sport tag, stands for. Not a diesel V6, but indeed the supercharged V8. And so we're going to get you all the action, all the details on how this car performs, how this engine performs as well. But you're wondering how we managed to get all of this mud onto the car, onto the wheels, and you know what? That's the action we want to take you into. I can tell you it was a lot of fun. So yes, it is time to get down and dirty with the Sport. On a wild off-road forest section, the terrain response is now set to mud and ruts. The car does slip a bit in the slush, but for the most part holds its integrity rather well and also takes you through pretty formidably. So the V8 is the real sport then. But in India, I do believe the diesel V6 will be very relevant. The cars will launch in October, and yes, I am glad that our market will be getting the car soon enough. Alright, so as you can see, the car is not just capable but very capable. It lives up to everything that Land Rover talks about, and especially when you think about a brand new product coming from this company, well, then you expect it to really live up to all of that, don't you? Write in and tell us what you thought of everything that you've seen on the Range Rover Sport, and of course any other questions or queries you have. You know how to get in touch with me. There's several ways, and remember our NDTV second screen on your NDTV app. Post your questions there as well, and I will pick some of those to put onto the show. Please wear your seatbelts. Please wear your helmets if you're on a two-wheeler. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.